Gary Grossman thinks a lot about reality. Really, Gary? He is not particularly qualified to do so. He does like to talk about them, though. Gary, thanks for enlightening us about reality.
Maybe I'll be unheavying you. Here's a poem. You call this reality? We live at a scale of unreality, the emergent, all we can perceive. At bottom, there's only energy and probability, manifesting as particles and waves, manifesting as atoms and elements, manifesting as molecules and compounds, manifesting at last as substance and objects. Those last, all we know through sense. The rest, abstraction to explain measurements through instruments made of that we try to measure. But wait, that's not all. Objects have place. Substance takes space. 3 whole dimensions of it. And objects move. Substance changes. There's time, a 4th dimension. And energy moves objects through forces. More abstraction. But you don't think that stuff moves all by itself, do you? Do you? Where there's dimension, there's a point. What is it? What is it? It's my morning habit to sit for a few minutes in a chair by a window and just look. What do I see? Close by, limbs and leaves of a maple tree. In the mid-distance, part of a dogwood. Further, a wall of forest. Some patches of sky, some blue, some white. On some mornings, a sheet of gray. Is that what's there? What about the myriad complex microstructures that make up those leaves, branches, trunks? The yet more numerous and varied and complex molecules that make up those structures? The still more numerous atoms that make up those? The particles and subparticles, or waves of what? That make up those atoms? The space and time in which all this is all located and in process. But what I see is leaves vibrating and branches swaying in the breeze. All I really know is that there is the experience of seeing them and the experience of the abstract notions of structure, molecules, atoms, wavicles, space, time. In another observation, a fictional one, the Australian author Peter Caudron writes in his science fiction novel Dark Beauty from the standpoint of a fictive extraterrestrial species. The most fascinating thing about Homo sapiens was their insistence on seeing their world as static. There was a status quo that humans embraced, but it was an illusion of their own making. They'd go to work 5 days a week and then relax on the weekend. Perhaps they'd take the kids to play sports or mow the lawn, and then another week would begin, just like the previous one. Humanity was blissfully unaware of reality. That their tiny planet is whizzing around a supermassive black hole at the center of their galaxy, drawing billions of stars into a massive bulge, didn't seem to bother them at all. For a species that can barely reach the local moon, the idea of traveling at 500,000 miles per hour around the galaxy seems to have escaped their notice. We see a static surface, but that's not real because it's so little of what's real. We need to see structurally deeper. We need to see spatially wider. We need to see that all is ever changing. We need to see the unity that is beyond connectedness, the interbeing. We can't, but we can remember. And that's what I want to talk about today. We all seem to have a mental picture of a world of things, static objects in static relationships to one another. Under specific circumstances, these objects can move. The relationships among them can change. A mighty mental construct can be built out of these elements, like this. Archimedes, the 3rd century BCE Greek, who may have been the greatest ancient mathematician, is often quoted as saying, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." This is perhaps more accurately translated as, "Give me a place to stand on, and I will move the earth." But as Archimedes himself knew, there is no such place to stand. This is not just physically true. Most importantly, it is true of our mental model of the world and how we act on it. We want a place to stand, a solid platform on which we can confidently build a structure that can guide us in our actions. But in reality, reality is like the ocean. I can't stand on it, but I can float. That doesn't get me very far unless a current takes me. I can swim, but not very fast or very long, and eventually I tire. I can grab onto a floating log to rest, but I'm still immersed in the cold and the wet. I can tie logs together into a raft. Now I can be dry and warm, but only some of the time. Waves wash over the raft, the wind can chill, and the sun can burn. And it's not easy to move the raft or control it. I can make a log into planks and build a rowboat. It's less subject to waves washing over it. It's higher in the water, so there's less friction. And it's got oars, so I can propel it more efficiently. Now I can really get somewhere. But I can tire from rowing too. I can build a bigger boat and put a sail on it. I can build a cabin that shields me from sun, wind, and rain. I can put a motor on it. I can go anywhere. Many of us can get together and build a ship. Now we can stand far above the ocean and less subject to the wetness, the pitching and rolling of the waves. And we can travel fast. We can build a cruise ship or a Titanic or a huge container ship like the Ever Given. I may have gotten too carried away with this marine technology, semaphore, or is it metally? But it's meant to show that step by step, with the best will in the world, our mental model takes us out of touch with the reality we're trying to live in. Up in the wheelhouse of the cruise ship, I'm much further away from the reality of the ocean itself than I would be if I were floating in it. These rafts, rowboats, sailboats, and ships are all means of distancing myself from the ocean. They're all ways of traveling on the surface of the ocean, not in it. So actually, I'm trying to use the ocean while trying to avoid its reality as much as possible. We live in a pervasive worldview that takes us as far from reality as the cruise ship takes us from the ocean. It does not partake of reality any more than standing in a cabin on a cruise ship partakes of the ocean. So it's just as subject to life's storms, reefs, and icebergs. That's how we learn to deal with the world. We inhabit a huge vessel. ignoring the existence of storms or reefs or icebergs, or people who fall overboard. But that's not how the world is. Those icebergs can sink that mental ship and leave us floundering. If we don't know how to float or swim, we're likely to drown, because in reality, there's no place to stand. Here's yet another aspect of reality. In the 18th century, pioneering scientists of the Enlightenment began to see that nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. As summed up by Antoine Lavoisier in France in 1774. That idea was not new. For instance, that vision of reality has been basic to Buddhism from its beginning more than 2,500 years ago. More recently, the late Vietnamese French monk Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Impermanence is something wonderful. If things were not impermanent, life would not be possible. A seed could never become a plant of corn. The child couldn't grow into a young adult. There could never be healing and transformation. We could never realize our dreams. So impermanence is very important for life. Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible." That's from his book, The Art of Living. Further along in the same book, he wrote, "Impermanence is a noun describing the nature of something, whether it's a flower, a star, your loved one, or your own body. But we shouldn't think that impermanence happens only to the outer appearance and that inside there's something everlasting. Impermanence means that nothing can remain the same thing in 2 consecutive moments. So in fact, there is no lasting thing that we can call impermanent. It's semantically absurd to say everything is impermanent. The truth is that everything is, only for one brief instant. Addressing yet another aspect of reality, in No Mud, No Lotus, Hahn writes, "If you look deeply into a flower, you see that a flower is made only of non-flower elements. In that flower, there's a cloud. Of course, we know a cloud isn't a flower, but without a flower can't be. If there's no cloud, there's no rain, and no flower can grow. You don't have to be a dreamer to see a cloud floating in a flower. It's really there. Sunlight is also there. Sunlight isn't flower, but without sunlight, no flower is possible. If we continue to look deeply into the flower, we see many other things, like the earth and the minerals. Without them, a flower cannot be. So it's a fact that a flower is made only of non-flower elements. A flower can't be by herself alone. A flower can only interbe with everything else. You can't remove the sunlight, the soil, or the cloud from the flower." All of that is a lot to swallow in one gulp. It's like a year's philosophy survey course in theories of existence and perception in 20 minutes. Our language doesn't have the grammar to easily describe them, but these views of reality, incomprehensibly, complexly, structurally deep, in constant motion, constantly changing, inseparable infinity, varied whole. These views may be as close to an accurate description of the real as we can construct right now. They utterly undercut surface, personal, social, economic notions like ownership, accumulation, eternal absolute rules. But we can't live in that reality. We don't have the brain for it. Our ancestors evolved something like 300,000 years ago. Excuse me a moment. Our ancestors evolved something like 300,000 years ago. They came into a world where their perceptions and capabilities were geared toward what appeared to be relatively stable objects and relationships, not an ever-changing, infinitely complex unity. When a lion is stalking you, it would not be much use to know the biochemistry of its cells. Given that brain, we couldn't handle reality on a moment-to-moment basis, even if we could perceive it. We can't even handle our world of objects when what's going on is too much for us. But that doesn't mean that we should just forget about reality. We can't see the depth of the world's structure, but we can remind ourselves that it's there, that we don't know what is at bottom, if there is a bottom, and that all is not as it appears. We can't see the perhaps infinite extent of the physical world, but we can remind ourselves that we're not a very big part of it, let alone its center. We can't see the ever-changing fluidity of the world. Some changes too fast, some too slow for us to perceive. But we can remind ourselves that whatever appears to be going on, good or bad, it isn't going to last. We can't see the beyond all words unity, but we can remind ourselves that it is and that we be of it. Those reminders might help us to build a personal, social, and political mental framework that recognizes everyone's humanity and everything's right to be. And we need to keep exploring. Returning to our marine metaphor, we need ways to explore beneath the surface of the ocean. Mental aqualungs, submarines, bathyspheres, bathyscaphes. May we take that as our task. Thank you.